Hello everyone and welcome back to the Green Man, and today's video I'm going to be ranking the albums of In Flames, the Swedish melodic death metal band formed in 1990, who are known very much as pioneers of the melodic death metal genre, along with bands like Dark Tranquillity and At the Gates. In Flames have somewhat divided their fan base over years because of very much changes in musical direction. Indeed, if you listen to their first album, Lunar Eclipse, and follow it up by listening to either Mask or Battles, you will see a huge change to the extent that you would probably think these were two completely different bands entirely. In Flames are a band, personally, I think you'll find out with my order, how I order these albums from my least favourite to my favourite. You will probably get a sense of where I fall, in which camp I fall, and I don't necessarily like to think of myself as falling completely into one camp. I think that there are exceptions for me, and you will find out in due course what those are. But it's interesting how In Flames have really there's such divided opinion out there, I think, about them. How some people really love their newer melodic, kind of almost slightly emo stuff that they have done in the last sort of 10 years, as compared to the brutal, more death metal-y, really heavy stuff of their early years, which was kind of, what a lot of albums which are seen very much as their classics. So where do I stand on all this? How will I rank these In Flames albums? Well, we're about to find out, because I'm about to crack on and name my number 13. My number 13 is 2016's Battles. I really didn't enjoy this album very much at all, really, to be honest. There were one or two moments in it that I quite enjoyed, but they were relatively rare. It's interesting because a lot of people name Battles, or they say they slightly prefer Battles to its predecessor, Siren Charms. In me, it's the other way around. I actually slightly prefer Siren Charms to Battles. There is just nothing really that really captures my imagination. Battles, I find the choruses a little bit corny in places, and that's not just because of their sort of change, as so much as I really don't think the lyrics are all that inventive either, and there wasn't much for me that really kind of caught my attention, even with the music itself, and yeah, I mean, Battles just fell slightly short for me. That being said, I did find there were the odd track that I quite enjoyed. I think that Through My Eyes was pretty good, Wallflower, and I kind of felt a little bit of like for very poppy Save Me at the end of the album. But other than that, I didn't really didn't find this album gelled much with me, I'm afraid. So that's my least favourite, Battles. My next choice at 12 is Either Mask, their most recent release, which I felt like was slightly better than Battles, but still had some of the same issues for me. There's something that's I think with the later, very recent In Flames albums, with Anders vocals, which I just can't really get to like as much. I know it works for some people, but his higher pitched light screams to me sometimes I'm not all that keen on, or his cleaner stuff, but at times it works, and at times I just don't feel like it does so much. With Either Mask, I thought there were some good moments here and signs of the riffing and the slightly more kind of dynamic side of In Flames maybe coming through a bit here, but overall I still didn't really dig this album too much, so this one's at number 12. Number 11 is Siren Charms, the album that I think I haven't spoken to a single person that likes Siren Charms, and I kind of enjoy it, and I said this in my hated albums video that I actually kind of like Siren Charms, and a little embarrassed to say it maybe, but there are some really good songs on here, I think. Sure, it's kind of a mixed bag, and it has some of the problems that I mentioned, I think, with Battles and with with Either Mask, but I still, something about Siren Charms has a little bit of charm. It has a little bit of charm, and Rusted Nail would be one of the things. In Plain View is a really good track. I think that's kind of an underrated In Flames track. And there are a couple of other tracks that I want to give a mention to for Siren Charms that I do really enjoy. I think Everything's Gone's pretty cool, and The Chase, the last song's kind of got a really cool atmosphere about it. I like the way they finish on the keys and everything. There's something about The Chase that I really enjoy. So that's Siren Charms in at number 11. Now this is where I think every album I do really like from here on in. So every album from this point forwards of In Flames I do really enjoy. I am a big fan, even though I've kind of just expressed how I don't like a couple of their really recent albums. I am a big fan of In Flames still, and in spite of that I will always love In Flames. So just to put that out there before we get any further. But number 10 is A Sense of Purpose. Number 10 is A Sense of Purpose, and I kind of like this. The first few times I really enjoyed this album when I listened to it. I just don't think for me that over the course of time it has quite lasted as I thought it might, A Sense of Purpose. But it has some beautiful melodies in it. It's really quite a beautiful melodic album in its own right. And I think of songs like The Chosen Pessimist, which are that kind of slow building 8-minute epic, which is almost like a prog piece. But it's a really nice melodic track, and there's moments like that in this album. Obviously, a lot of people think of Alias in this album, which is a cracking song. One of my favourite In Flames songs, actually, a kind of underrated one. Sure, it's got that kind of that rhythm. It's just got that rhythm, which is extremely infectious and will stay in your head for a long time after you've heard it. And I think it's quite a powerful. In fact, this album as a whole is a pretty underrated In Flames album. Still quite low down on my list, coming in at 10 of 13. But I think it's pretty cool in its own way. An interesting album for sure is A Sense of Purpose. Coming at number 9, much lower down than I suspect this album would be on a lot of people's lists. Commercially it was quite successful, I think, and it showed perhaps for many fans this was a bit of a return to form for In Flames after the two albums that came before it. But for me, actually, I'm not that big a fan of this album. This is Come Clarity, came out in 2006. It was most certainly a pretty heavy album, a hefty album. They got the mixing pretty good, the production was good on this album. For me, those are the positive points. But also for me, I didn't feel that the songs, again, for lasting value, I didn't feel the songs on Come Clarity for me have much lasting value. Take This Life, again, there's some catchiness to these songs, but in terms of the dynamics the dynamic of this album as a whole, it never really has latched onto me completely, and therefore it comes in quite low down at number 9 for a lot of people, I suspect. But I still do enjoy Come Clarity as an album. I think it's quite good still. Number 8. So what comes in at number 8? So my choice for number 8 is, I think, the most underrated of the recent, I call it recent, and this was about a decade ago that this album came out now, but it feels recent to me. It's Sounds of a Playground Fading, and this is 8 of 13 on my list, so we're getting higher now. And actually, I do really like this album. I think it's possibly the most underrated in their discography, the one that slips people by. And sure, again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, this album. There are a couple of tracks that I'm not so bothered with, but there's certainly some really, really outstanding songs, I think, and outstanding ideas. Some really atmospheric touches, some industrial touches that I think work in this album very well. There's a lot of space in it, a lot of ambience as well, that make it a really moody and interesting, still sounds like In Flames to me, and yet it's still a really good album of music, just generally. And I would just like to give a shout out to The Puzzle, because that track is one of the best In Flames tracks that I've heard, because it's got heaviness to it, it's got a good hook in that riff, great chorus, and the outro is just incredible. It's kind of proggy, it's kind of synthy, I think. It's just so atmospheric and fantastic. Don't miss The Puzzle if you visit this album, because it's a really good one. I'm going to move on. Other good tracks on here, like Where the Dead Ships Dwell as well, but you can check those out in your own time if you're not familiar with Sounds of a Playground Fading. So after talking up that album, next we go right back in time to their debut album, Lunar Strain, which, if I've got my ordering right, my numbers right here, comes in number 7. Lunar Strain is one of those albums that it's great, it's brilliant. I mean, I think the earliness and the fact that the production on this is interesting, and that the death metal songs feel so raw and so rough that I don't think they come out as well as they could have. Yet the cleaner tracks, and like Everlost Part 2, really beautiful, come out lovely and clean, and very, you can easily discern what's happening in that song. But I think that's the thing for me, is that this album is so raw. It's the production and everything kind of lets it down a little bit, but it's still a classic In Flames album. You can see how this album got In Flames into the whole, into this whole scene, and how people started to take notice of this band from very early on, because Lunar Strain, I was going to say Lunar Eclipse, Lunar Strain is a really strong album by them. And now we move on to the really creme de la creme, the top 6, the top half of this list. And this is where every album for me is pretty much a banger, an absolute banger, without a shadow of a doubt. So, number 6, Soundtrack to Your Escape. And I really like this album, and I know a lot of people actually don't really like this album. For me, it's got too many good songs on here for me to ignore it, or to put it, quite low down on this list. I just couldn't distance myself from it, and I thought, sometimes the middle albums are really hard to order, because you kind of feel similarly about each one in its own way. I just feel like Soundtrack to Your Escape, Touch of Red, great track. There's just Evil in the Closet, I really enjoy. You've got My Sweet Shadow, absolutely fantastic song and single, and video as well from them on that one. And I think pretty much I enjoyed nearly every track on Soundtrack to Your Escape. And obviously A Quiet Place as well is a really good song on that album. I just really enjoyed that one. And following on from number 6's Soundtrack to Your Escape is Reroute to Remain. Funnily enough, the first song I ever heard by In Flames was on Reroute to Remain, and that was System. And System is the kind of In Flames I do really like, really sort of unrelenting, just power, and then that cool, slightly cleaner chorus. But still, Anders' cleaner vocals here I thought worked pretty well with the music and the rough music, and there's certainly some atmospheric touches on Reroute to Remain, which were a sign, I think, of things to come in their later albums. And I really like Reroute to Remain, whether that's slightly a nostalgic thing as well, and the fact that it's got to my number 5 spot on this on this pretty amazing band's list is interesting. There are some issues, maybe a little bit, with the mixing, the production. The guitars at times kind of have this like sound to them that kind of sometimes it makes it sound kind of cool, but other times I'm not sure it works so well. So maybe that is just a slight criticism why it comes down at number 5. But then again, the reason it actually comes at number 5 is because all the next 4 are the ultimate In Flames classics that are just so good. And it's not to say anything too disrespectful to their new albums, or even, the albums of the sort of middle 2000s. There's just something that is so good about their early albums. In this band's instance, you just can't ignore it. They're just so outstanding. Every single one of these 4 albums is just so outstanding. They are just almost in a league of their own, as the saying is, I guess. They're in a league of their own. So, number 4. Number 4 is, for me, Horacle. A lot of people's number 1's Horacle. it's quite a short album, isn't it? But it's a really good, really aggressive, really, fantastic changes throughout. Jotun is one of the best openers to an In Flames album you're ever likely to hear. And there's also some pretty cool, the folky vibes in Jester Script Transfigured I really enjoy. Sometimes the cleaner acoustic stuff in these early albums is as good as the heavier death metal stuff. I love the mixing up of those kind of things. Episode 666, what a classic. Need anything else be said? If you just need a moment to have a good old, headbang, episode 666 will do the job for you. Number 3 is Clayman. An album I recently picked out of my mystery box of CDs in the Random Picks episodes. Clayman, just great. I love it. I love Clayman. Why isn't it quite high enough? Well, because the next 2 albums are just stupendously good, basically. But Clayman is a classic to me. It's an In Flames classic without a shadow of a doubt. It has so many good tracks on it. I can listen to this album time and time again and not get bored of it. And you got Clayman, the title track, right? Awesome track. One of my personally all-time favourite tracks, Pinball Map. That's got a great chorus, great verses, awesome solo. One of Anders' kind of best vocal moments in that track for some reason. I always think he's just got the vocals right. In Clayman as a whole, I love Anders' vocals in Clayman. There's something about his vocals in this album. I think he gets it right in Clayman, personally. I don't know, I'd be interested to know what you think about his vocal evolution, but I really like how it is in Clayman, in 2000's Clayman. So Clayman, number 3. Moving on at pace because this video is getting incredibly long. So number 2, the Jester Race. And again, probably an album that would be number 1 for a lot of people. It's another classic In Flames album. And the guitar solos on this one are for me the best In Flames guitar solos. They are peerless. They're just fantastic guitar solos. One of them in Jester Race is one of my all-time favourites. December Flower has a cracker as well. You got Dead to Eternity on here, another great track. Lord Hypnos, another absolute belter. You've got so many good songs. A Dead God in Me, I think. I love even the slightly more, again, that sort of folky acoustic clean track. There's just so many good tracks on this album. I mean, I could pour over the Jester Race for a pretty long time and talk about it in a separate video entirely. Much like the next choice, which is my number 1, my all-time favourite In Flames album, after some deliberation, because to be honest, the top 3 here are very close to each other, and particularly with the top 2, Jester Race, of course, what's left, Colony. Colony, rather like Jester Race and Clayman, I can just listen to that album all the way through and not realise that how quickly the time's gone, because it just goes in a flash, because it's such a great album. And every track on this album is great. Even I like Palasander's Visa, I think, the shorter track in the middle of the album. It's just everything is just amazing. If you've not heard Colony before and you're a metalhead, or you're getting new into metal, is Colony a good place to start though? I don't know, maybe it is actually. It's kind of catchy, it's got some great groove to it. You can almost, it's almost kind of dancey at times. There's so much great, great rhythms and great grooves within Colony. It's one of the reasons I also love that album so much. Anyway, that brings me to the end of this one, to the end of ranking the In Flames albums. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to like and subscribe as always to the Green Man channel. I will have more of these videos to come, and I hope to see you next time. Take care very much, everyone. See you next time.